Hello all and welcome to Miss Martin's Classroom. Today's podcast will be featuring a fantasy YA middle grade novel. This horror/fantasy series begins with a dark prophecy that foretells an ancient evil that will threaten the realm. None but Mariyah and her musically gifted fiance, Lem, can stop this great evil approaching. Their journey takes them to Lamoria, a place ruled by religious sects, where Lem trains as a feared assassin, and Mariyah learns how to effectively use her magic. Heart interrupted. All things that end begin anew. Mariyah leaned back in her chair, rubbing her neck and twisting the stiffness from the muscles in her back. Staring at the 3 ledgers and 2-inch-high stack of papers on the small dining room table in front of her caused an involuntary groan to slip out. This was her father's fault. His organizational ineptitude was a continual source of frustration. He was a master at cultivating the grapes and perfecting the wine, but when it came to the administration of their family business, he procrastinated needlessly, waiting until the work was so backed up that it took days, sometimes weeks, to put the books in order. She cast her eyes around the kitchen, cursing as she realized that, as usual, she'd been too wrapped up in work to remember to light the stove and heat the kettle. Looking at the various pantries and cabinets, she ran through a mental inventory of their contents. Wine, wine, and more wine. A deep thud and the clatter of breaking glass snatched her attention to the window. Not again, she thought. Another crash and more breaking glass had her running to the front door. Flinging it open, she saw Tamian standing over a grate, eyes wide, hands covering his mouth. Wine was seeping into the ground around his feet, filling the air with its sweet aroma. "Again, Tamian," she said, with undisguised irritation. "How many does that make this year? 5? Tamian was nearly as clumsy as he was strong, but at least he didn't sneak away to drink when left unwatched. Wine from Annadale Farms, named for her great-grandmother, was a mighty temptation. One that few could resist, apparently. Tamian was the 3rd hand they'd hired in as many years. After old Chano died, more than 3 dozen had come calling, hoping to get hired on as his replacement. Initially, Mariyah hadn't understood why so many had applied, considering it didn't pay much and the work only lasted through the fall. It was when she'd found Milo, Chano's first replacement, in a drunken stupor behind the house, the wagons only half loaded, that it had become clear. Her back and arms twitched at the memory of loading more than 50 crates of wine by herself. Tamian had a deceptively thin build, though he was by no means frail, having spent his youth working the fields. His close-cropped red hair and fair complexion still gave him a boyish appearance, even though he was nearly 40 years old. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice muffled by his palms. "I'll pay for it. Please don't tell your father." Mariyah planted her hands on her hips. "It's not my father you should worry about. You know how long it took me to fill those." This was an exaggeration. She had indeed filled and corked the bottles, but that was 4 years ago. This year, her father had hired someone else to bottle and store the wine, and it was still aging in the main cellar. But this batch was of particularly good quality, even by her family's exceedingly high standards. Each drop was precious. Tamian opened the crate with fumbling hands. "I'm sorry. Look, I only broke 2. "I should send you home before it's 3, she said, but then softened her tone and forced a smile at Tamian's anguished expression. "It's all right. I was planning on keeping one for the house anyway. Clean out the grass and put it by the porch, please." "What about your father? You don't think he'll fire me, do you?" Her father had sworn if Tamian broke another bottle, he would do just that, and he was sure to notice the crate was short by 2. "I'll tell him I did it," she sighed with an exasperated sigh. "Now you had better get back to it. You don't want to miss the festival." Tamian was visibly relieved. "Thank you. I promise to be more careful." Mariyah turned to the door, pausing just inside. Take one for yourself, she called back. I'll tell father I broke 3. Celine, Maria's best friend since childhood, had given up knocking and let herself in. Entering the kitchen, she let out an exasperated groan. "Whoa, why aren't you ready? I told my brother we'd meet him before the festival starts. Or did you forget?" "I was just finishing up here," said Mariyah. "Don't worry, we'll be there on time." "Lem's playing tonight?" asked Celine, as she pulled a bottle from the cabinet and uncorked it with her teeth. "I will never get what you see in him." Mariyah could feel her irritation building. For one thing, he never takes without asking. Celine grinned and took a seat at the opposite end of the table. "You want me to put it back?" "No, but you could at least use a glass this time." Celine took a long gulp directly from the bottle and then offered it to Mariyah. Mariyah growled and pushed back her chair. "I can see you're planning on having a very good time tonight." Celine grinned. "One of us needs to. All you ever do is pine over Lem." "Jealous?" Celine coughed a laugh. "Jealous? Over Lem? I would never. I mean, he's just so peculiar. Always going on and on about music. And those eyes of his." She gave an exasperated shudder. "Honestly, you could do so much better." "I like his eyes." She did. Unusually gray and large, they had the power to capture her whenever she looked into them. It was true that Lem lived an unconventional life, but someone with his talent was in high demand. Admittedly, she hated that he was forced to be away so much, but it was something she had learned to tolerate. Some considered him odd, easily distracted, and often preoccupied, but she knew that his passion for music was beyond that of normal folk, and his talent was made manifest when he played. Her mother had once remarked that people often cast scorn on things they thought to be out of the ordinary. Unlike her father, who wanted Mariyah to wed someone with what he thought to be a more stable profession, she was in favor of the match. And the fact was, however, that Lem was not merely a musician. He was far and away the best in Valari. One did not hold an important event without hiring Lem. The coin he made from students alone earned more than enough to be considered respectable by any standards. Setting aside these thoughts, she entered her bedroom and crossed over to the wardrobe, pausing to stare for a long moment. If Lem weren't playing tonight, she could have feigned illness or found some other excuse not to attend. Only the thought of seeing him urged her to open the wardrobe doors. She pulled out a blue and gold dress her mother had bought 2 years prior for her birthday. Lem had remarked at the time how well it suited her. Mariyah smiled. "Yes, this will do nicely." Lem wanted to weep, to scream, to do something, anything that would take away the feeling of helplessness that threatened to overcome him. He threw back the blanket and placed his feet on the cold wood floor and slumped at the edge of the bed. Perhaps a spot of whiskey might help. Shemi kept some in the kitchen pantry. He didn't enjoy it as much as his uncle, preferring wine, but it had its uses. A garbled cry sounded from beyond the door. Lem snatched up a lantern and hurried to the hallway, turning towards Shemi's bedroom. But another agonized moan from the spare room had him sliding to a halt and running in the opposite direction. The stranger was still in bed, but was twisting and groaning as if in horrible pain. Lem placed the lantern on the floor and leaned over the ailing man, unsure what to do. "It's all right. Calm down. You're safe." Shemi. He should get Shemi. He turned to call for his uncle, but a hand shot up and gripped his wrist. "He's coming!" the stranger shouted, thrashing his head from side to side. "He's coming!" Lem tried to pull free, but the steely fingers held fast. The stranger's eyes popped open and fixed on Lem. Is it you?" Lem could not form a reply. Sweat drenched the stranger's hair and face. "You must go," he rasped. "You must leave this place. He's coming. You must go before he finds you." I'll get help," Lem finally managed to say. Again he tried to break free. "No!" With irresistible strength, the stranger pulled Lem forward and wrapped his other arm around his neck. Lem panicked, frantically pushing against the stranger's chest, but to no effect. In a single motion, the stranger leaned up, crushing Lem to his body. A flash of white light covered Lem's eyes, momentarily blinding him. As his vision slowly returned, his nostrils were assaulted by the rancid stench of burnt timbers and rotten flesh. The bedroom and the stranger were gone. In their place was an open field, roughly 200 yards in diameter, completely encircled by a massive inferno reaching as high as the treetops. Heat assaulted him with brutal ferocity, but there was nowhere to run. Strewn across the ground like broken twigs were hundreds upon hundreds of bodies, mangled and twisted, some hacked to pieces, their faces contorted and frozen into their final horror-stricken moments. Many he recognized at once. Friends, acquaintances, students. He averted his eyes, fearing that one of them might be Shemi or Mariyah. "This can't be real!" shouted Lem. "It's a trick! What have you done to me?" "He is coming," the voice of the stranger called out from all directions, no longer shrill with madness. The enormous volume of the deep baritone reverberated in his chest. "He will find you. He will destroy everything you love. You must go. Hurry, before it's too late." As threats awaken and dark forces begin to gather, Brian D. Anderson weaves a mysterious journey into the magic surrounding Lamoria in The Bard's Blade. This is the first installment of Anderson's The Sorcerer's Song series, and this is truly a series you can simply sink your teeth into. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also check out my hashtag MSMReadyToRead and follow me on Instagram at ms_martins_class for more new books and fun lessons that are sure to engage you and your kiddos. Be sure to tune in next week for my next Book Talk Tuesday podcast, and please comment below if you've read this book or another book by the author. Thanks for watching!